since you are on top of these issues, especially on bills and laws that are being passed, especially in the agricultural space, are there some laws that we should be looking for? Because there has been a lot of mamas. So we had a lot of talk about government banning use of manure at some time. We had the issue with potatoes. We had the issue with bees. That if you're not,
I think there's also the livestock bill.
So are there bills that are in the government right now that we should be aware of?
Okay, I think just for clarity purposes, the manure one, it was a proposed amendment in the Food Crops Act, I think of 2013, but that never saw the light of day.
Okay.
So farmers can use manure, in farming. The livestock one, I think also it caused a lot of uproar online, and I don't think it went through. The one that concerns me the most, and it's actually a strategy, the agricultural sector transformation strategy of 2019 till 2029. The reason why it concerns me the most, and why it should also concern other young people probably in agriculture or anyone who grows food, small scale or not, there's the issue of moving farmers out of farming into more lucrative jobs. That's how this strategy defines agricultural transformation happening in Kenya, and Kenyans consuming more processed foods.
Interesting.
That's how this strategy defines transformation. Like if we see more Kenyans eating more processed food, that's now transformation.
Okay.
And then there's also the aspect of land. So they're saying one of the biggest inhibitions to agricultural transformation is that the land in Kenya is communally owned. So for us to be able to transform agriculture in the way we want to, we have to make the land privately owned. What does that mean? Like relate that to kicking farmers out of farming, and then now land should not be communally owned, but privately owned, and then Kenyans consuming more processed foods. This was actually listed down. If you check the agricultural sector transformation strategy, 2019-2029, you will see that. It's actually there, laid bare.
Crazy, yeah.
And it's insane. And this is what should be concerning people, that this is a strategy for agricultural transformation in our country. And it wants to do that. And then there's also the aspect of input, increasing access to input. I'm not saying farmers should not have access to input. They should, but the right kind of input. We don't want farmers having access to chemical fertilizers. And these fertilizers are actually harming the soil. We've seen rising cases of soils that are very acidic in nature because of the continued use of chemical fertilizers. So do we want to expose our farmers to that? And relate that to what is happening with the fertilizer scandal. Because, we're saying, we need to give our farmers subsidized fertilizers. There's an avenue for corruption there.
Exactly.
Because everyone is like, we're providing subsidized fertilizers, but they are actually stealing. So farmers are not having access to this, but that is also in the strategy. Like farmers need to have access to fertilizers. There's also the farmers being registered for them to access these inputs. Like I for sure get messages from the NCPB. I'm always addressed like some Gideon guy. Like they didn't even get my name right. They addressed me as some Gideon guy. Ati, please come and collect your fertilizer. I'm like, you've got my details wrong, first of all. So what are the chances that other farmers are actually not getting access to these fertilizers? So that's one of the policies, or I would call it a strategy. The other one that really, really concerns me, aside of course from the Seed and Plant Varieties Act, there's also the Agricultural Soil Conservation and Management, I think, policy. It was passed last year in 2023. And it's very much focused on soil conservation and reducing, soil erosion and all that. And one of the key things that stood out for me in that particular policy was that the policy was says that for us to conserve the soil or to reduce soil erosion, we have to move the land from being communally owned to privately owned. So then we can enforce the soil conservation measures and all that. Does that ring a bell with the strategy? Yeah, the other strategy.
Yeah, okay.
No,
that
there's a pattern. Yeah, you can see the pattern.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I'm wondering, what is so difficult about working with agricultural extension officers to train farmers on their lands on soil conservation methods?
Yeah.
What's so difficult about that? Why do we have to transfer land ownership to privately owned for us to be able to implement measures such as soil conservation? We have a lot of young Kenyans who are agronomists, agroecologists, agricultural scientists. Why not pull those young Kenyans into the agricultural jobs for those who like to be, agricultural extension officers?
Yeah.
Why not pull them in there so that they can actually support farmers?
Yeah.
Why change the land ownership? And this is not something I'm making up. I've actually gone through those policies.
Yeah.
And whenever I read them, I'm like, oh, wow. So they're coming for our land. This for me seems like, recolonization.
Yeah.
But through land, which was the same as the first colonization Kenya had. It was through land. Like if you look at our Kenyan highlands, most of our fertile land is gone.
Yeah.
We're talking about food insecurity. Nobody talks about the fertile lands. Nobody talks about tea being grown on our fertile lands. And I'm not saying growing tea is bad, because it creates revenue.
Yeah, it's a cash crop.
It's a cash crop, creates revenue for Kenya.
Yeah.
But as a country that speaks of its population not having access to food, but having our fertile lands under cash crops or under concrete buildings, are we serious when we say we want to address this? And I know somebody will say, food insecurity is about, having access to the physical food or the resources to buy the food, which is okay. But what is the safety of this food?
Yeah.
That brings in the aspect of food safety. You have the money to buy the food, right? We've seen cases of our sugar being contaminated with mercury.
Yeah.
So how safe is that food? So are we better off growing our own food where we know how we've grown it, or buying food buying imported food that we don't know how safe it is?